If you happen to look closely at this morning's bulletin, you may have noticed my sermon title, which is in the form of a question. What will your epitaph say? As morbid as this may sound, I actually looked up a variety of epitaphs this past week. And interestingly, some of them are quite humorous. I guess even in death, some people want to make others laugh. For instance, Mel Blanc, the man of 1,000 voices, and specifically the voice of Porky Pig, put on his tombstone, "That's all, folks." Former TV talk show host Merv Griffin put on his, "I will not be right back after this break." Another one simply read, "Here lies John Yeast. Pardon me for not rising." And one final one from Tombstone, Arizona, that reads, "Here lies Lester Moore. 4 shots from a .44. No less, no more." And while these epitaphs provided me with a good laugh, the question that is my sermon title for this morning is a serious one, but one that most people prefer not to think about. What will your epitaph say? Another way to ask that question is, what will people most remember about you when you're gone? Or, in just a few words, how would you like others to remember what you most value in life? As I turn to our gospel lesson for today, we notice that Jesus is telling us another parable. And at the very end of that story, God provides an epitaph for the farmer. It simply reads, "You fool." No doubt, this is a harsh verdict from God. And obviously, this is not the epitaph any one of us wants placed on our tombstone. But in order to understand how this came about, we need to take a closer look at this entire story from the 12th chapter of Luke. As Luke informs us at the beginning of this story, Jesus is brought into a family dispute about an inheritance. A situation that is just as realistic today as it would be back then. But rather than getting caught into the middle of this family feud, Jesus turns it into a teaching moment. He begins by summarizing his main point. Take care, he says. Be on your guard against all kinds of greed. For one's life does not consist in the abundance of possessions. And while that message is quite clear, as a great teacher, Jesus follows it up with a story to further drive home his point, and significantly, to make it much more personal. As we already heard, the story Jesus tells is fairly straightforward. The land of a certain farmer produced an abundant crop. So abundant, in fact, that it created a dilemma for him. He simply did not have enough room to store all of it. To remedy the situation, he decides that he will tear down his barns and build even larger ones. And once that is completed, the farmer concludes that he is now able to retire, to sit back and relax, or, as it's put in our story, to eat, drink, and be merry. Now, before I get to the plot twist in this story, it is important for me to say just a few things about this farmer. He is an upstanding individual. He has not cheated in order to get his wealth. In fact, it appears as if he has worked very hard in order to get ahead. The book of Proverbs actually commends such a person. Anyone who tills the land will have plenty of bread, it says. But the one who follows worthless pursuits will have plenty of poverty. This farmer was hardworking. This farmer was prosperous. This farmer was the type of person that we would rightly commend today. But again, according to Jesus, the final verdict on his life was this: he was foolish. Why was the farmer so foolish? As I understand the story, I think it is because he failed to take into account the temporary nature of life. He thought that just as his barns were filled to the brim, so were his years. But that's not the way life always works out. And that is exactly what Jesus reminds us of in the startling conclusion. You fool! This very night, your life is being demanded of you. It may sound like a harsh indictment on the farmer, but it is one that we also need to hear, lest the same thing be said of us one day. I confess, while the farmer may have been foolish, I still have some sympathy for him. Not only was he someone who worked very hard to get ahead, but he appeared to be ready to make a change in his life someday soon. Someday soon. No doubt, that is a very intriguing phrase. It is one that is just dripping with promise, but potentially regret. It is one that is filled with hope, but perhaps disappointment. It is one that, if we say for too long, leads us to receiving the epitaph, "You fool." Someday soon, I will dedicate more of my time to prayer. Someday soon, I will spend more time staying in contact with my family. Someday soon, I will become more involved volunteering with that organization. Someday soon, I will be more generous with my money. Someday soon, I will slow down and smell the roses. Unfortunately, I am all too aware of some areas in my own life where I struggle with my priorities, where what I say is important is not where I invest my time, where I have been saying someday soon for far too long. Perhaps some of you feel the same way. If you can relate, I would ask you to consider the following questions. What are, or what is, the someday soon that is lingering in your life? What is the something that you know in your heart is important, but something that you are not currently making enough time for? If you are able to respond to that, I would encourage you to make a life change, to adjust your life and your schedule to include that priority, to turn that someday soon into a right now. To close, I would like to return to my sermon title one final time. What will your epitaph say? Hopefully, by pondering that question on a regular basis, you will remember that life is a gift and death a reality. You will no longer postpone living until someday soon, but instead you will embrace the gift of abundant life that God offers to you this day. And while I would never consider stealing this epitaph, I have to admit, Frank Sinatra has one on his tombstone that I think is quite appropriate, especially for us as Christians. It reads, "The best is yet to come." How very true. Amen. As you're able, I invite you to stand for our hymn.